The third major critique of the democratization of the internet is the power of corporations. And some would talk about this as the personalization of everything online. A lot of this comes down to what Eli Pariser has described as the filter bubble. And the filter bubble is a really important idea that most of us have not really heard much of. A definition of the filter bubble is, as you can see here, the unique universe of information created for each of us through the personalization of the web, which fundamentally alters the way we encounter ideas and information. Now, this is incredibly important, and Eli Pariser describes three different elements, three really important elements of the filter bubble. First, he suggests that we are alone in it, meaning that it's different for everyone. We'll look here in just a second at Google search, which is probably a great way to start to take a peek at this. It is no longer that if you Google something, it will be the same as the person next to you. Everyone's Google searches will come back slightly different. They will be personalized. Second, it is something that we enter without choosing. It's not necessarily something that we need to opt into. It's something that occasionally we can opt out of. The internet is increasingly becoming more personalized, and that's very, very important, even though we don't necessarily choose to do this in the first place. And third, he suggests that this is largely invisible. This is not something that most people pay attention to, not something that most people actually are aware of. And I would add one piece to this, which is that those people who do know that we are in a filter bubble, that the internet is increasingly personalizing our experience online, most people like it. These are companies that help to personalize our services, and consumers like us that use things like Amazon and use Google searches and use Facebook for that matter, and it will help us find content that is more relevant for us. The reality, however, when it comes to democratic discourse, when it comes to the idea of using the internet as an open and equal marketplace of ideas, is that the corporations that are giving us our information, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, all sorts of social media sites, are modifying the information that we actually have access to, and as a result, the information that we think is open and equal is not exactly open and equal the way that we always thought that it was. Google search is a great way to explore this. Afterwards, we'll talk briefly about the impact that this personalization has on media and the news we receive, and then ultimately the impact that all of that has on democracy. Just to show how all of our information is personalized, we'll take a look at Google. So I've brought up the general search box. Here, and there are a couple things that we'll pay attention to. First is something that came out relatively recently, something that's very intuitive, something referred to as Google Instant, which is that as soon as we start typing anything here, we see information coming up that is automatic, that is instantaneous, and is helping to direct our search. This is different for everyone. So if you search for this, if you type in how, anything could come up, right? It might be something that's common, like How I Met Your Mother, how to tie a tie, or it could be something that's personalized, like how is Google Instant personalized? How do I post to YouTube from online video? These are things that I've searched recently and ultimately shows that content here. It also uses my web history as well as other information that I have accessed through any one of Google's searches through what are referred to as signals, different signals that tell Google or that Google uses to enter into their algorithm to try to personalize this service. So what might come up for you when you type in how might be very different than what it is for me. And we can imagine how important this is when we think about political ideas. When I type in GOP, for instance, right, the Republican Party, I see a couple things pop up here. I see GoPro, GOP, Gopher, right? Now, Gopher might pop up for you, but for me, as the proud Minnesotan that I am, the University of Minnesota mascot is the Golden Gophers. So there's no doubt that my infatuation with everything Minnesota has affected what comes up in my particular search here. If we were to type in any of these things and hit enter, right, then you see the web results come up just as it always has. And if I'm searching for Obama here, what you'll notice is that I have a few things, whether it's news being near the top or a few other pieces of information down below. These things are personalized for me. You might have very similar results come up if you searched for Obama, but they might be in slightly different order. And as we all know, the first page of Google results are really what almost everyone uses. It's rare that people are really diving much deeper than that. So whether it's just the different ranking of these different pieces of information, or sometimes you'll see something that that is very personal for you and might not be connected to anything that would come up on my search. One quick way to change this is if you notice right over here in the upper right hand corner, you have two tabs. One with a little person icon shows the private results, meaning that it's a personalized results for me or for you. Next to it, you can hide private results. And if we switch here, this is essentially creating the unpersonalized Google that existed before the use of these signals. Another way to turn off this personalization, besides toggling at the top of that Google screen, is by switching settings right in your browser. You can go to Preferences and adjust that, or you can also add this suffix, the and PWS equals 0 will essentially create that global web search. You can add that to the end of any URL that you are searching in Google, and that will ultimately create this as well. So there are ways to create an unpersonalized Google search, but ultimately you need to opt out of it. It's going to naturally be personalized for you, and that makes sense for Google, and it makes sense for most people. We're going to be getting things that are better or more directed towards what our prior interests would indicate. But it limits the amount of information or the types of information that we all have access to. If I'm interested in someone from a very different part of the political spectrum, other perspectives, it's now going to be a little bit harder. I need to ask for those things as opposed to assuming that they're going to come up, and that's very, very important. Ultimately, this has a huge impact on both media and information as well as our democratic process. When it comes to our democracy overall and the information that we get, we know that democracy requires citizens to see things from one another's point of view. But instead, we are now more and more enclosed into our own filter bubbles, our own echo chambers. So it's going to be harder and harder to find that information. And that's both based on what we see online and also what we see on cable news. Right? Those people who are watching Fox News all the time are probably going to have a very different result when they search for Barack Obama than those people who are watching MSNBC all the time. Right? The echo chamber that we choose when it comes to what information we get on TV and in our newspapers ultimately is going to carry over in our search history, in our web use, in terms of what we see online. And the impact there is something that Eli Pariser really talks about, is that by definition, a world constructed from the familiar, from what we already know, is a world in which there is nothing to learn. If personalization is too acute, it could prevent us from coming into contact with mind-blowing, preconception-shattering experiences and ideas that change how we think about the world and about ourselves. The idea here is that our opportunity to interact with new ideas, to come in contact with different perspectives, is going to be harder and harder as the filter bubble continues to enclose us tighter and tighter into what it expects we already like and we already want to see. That might be nice from a consumer standpoint, but it is not necessarily helpful from a democracy standpoint.